Thank you, Emma. These dates are outlined in your grant agreement, both in the agreement and on the Exhibit C, and Emma will be going through those shortly. Please note that these dates might differ from your experience, or this timeline generally might differ from your experience if you've got experience with our previous grant programs, because we do have certain requirements based on our funding partners for the big program. The first date to note is the award date, which is April 21st. So we backdated all grant awards to then. And if there are elements of your project that occurred on or after April 21st, those expenses may still be eligible for reimbursement. So if you have questions about that, just give us a call. Then you'll note the September 8th deadline for grant agreements to be executed and returned to us. Emma will review the elements of the grant agreement, including the exhibits, as we move through today's webinar. The project begin date of December 31st, 2023. So depending on the nature of your project, whether it's an equipment purchase or construction, the start date milestone is December 31st. If you're running up against issues with that deadline, call us as soon as you know, so that we can work with you through that. Then the project completion date is December 31st, 2024. If, as you're moving through, you're running into issues, call us so that we can discuss them as early as possible, because that date is a little harder than some of the other ones as far as making sure that we maintain our compliance in order to be able to provide funding for your project. So after your project is complete, when you're going through the final report and reimbursement process, you'll have about 6 months to get that over to us, but hopefully it won't take you that long, because we are definitely going to be eager to review everyone's final reports and get you your checks by the end of that time. We do try to turn those around within 3 or 4 weeks. Know that that's based on a completed project completion report and reimbursement request. So sometimes it takes a little more back and forth to ensure we have all of the documents and information that we need to provide the full reimbursement. And now I'm going to kick it over to Emma so that she can go through the grant agreement and the required exhibits.
Thanks, Renee. So the grant agreement is a legal contract between Capitalized Albany Corporation and each grantee. It's going to outline the obligations and requirements of each party. If you've been in the grants world before, you've executed grant agreements. For those of you who haven't, we'll run through each component and what they mean. Executing the grant agreement is the first step in the post-award process. So to execute the grant agreement, it will need to be signed and notarized by both parties. That's by you, the grantee, and then by us at Capitalized Albany Corporation. In order to execute it, you'll need to return a signed and notarized grant agreement to Capitalized Albany Corporation. We have the first and last page of the grant agreement shown on the screen here, along with a signed and witnessed Exhibit G, media release form, a signed and notarized Exhibit H, non-conclusive agreement, and a certificate of insurance. Notary services are generally available at your bank as well as at City Hall. We do have a notary in the building, so if you have problems accessing one, please let us know and we can coordinate. The grant agreement should be executed before beginning your project, but no later than September 8th, 2023. So we'll go into what all these exhibits are in just a minute, but I do want to say that in general, our preference for receiving each of these documents is to receive them electronically. If it's hard for you to scan them, we can accept a picture as well. We can accept hard copies and scan them in at our office, although I do want to give a heads up that we do not have we don't retain paper records. So if it's things that you'll need back, you'll need to scan those and get them to us. Once the grant agreement has been executed by both parties, we will send you a signed copy for your files. So the grant agreement includes 8 exhibits. We're going to go through these today. I do apologize in advance for jumping out of order. We'll start with exhibits A through C. Then we'll talk about the exhibits required to execute your grant agreement. This is exhibits G and H. And finally, we'll talk about exhibits required through the reimbursement process, which is D and E. We realized putting together this post-award webinar that this is not the order they'll be in moving forward. So you're guinea pigs here today. That's why we're jumping out of order. So as we go through, we'll talk about what needs to be signed, what needs to be returned to Capitalize Albany, and what each exhibit really is. So, and as a reminder, in the email you got with your award letter and a link to the registration for this webinar included the grant agreement and all of the exhibits, as well as a grant agreement instructions document. If there are any questions, you're always welcome to give us a call. If you didn't receive that email and somehow made it to the webinar anyways, awesome. We're so glad you're here. Please let us know. We have had some issues with spam filters, so please add development@capitalizealbany.com to your kind of known senders or contacts, just to make sure you're getting all communication moving forward. All right, with that said, Exhibit A, the application. It was included in the email to you because it is part of the legal document. You do not need to return this back to us. That's just all of the information we had that made the decision where you guys were selected to receive an award. Exhibit B, the program guidelines. These outline the requirements and the processes of the big program. You saw these when you were submitting your application. These do not need to be returned to us. Exhibit C, the project scope of work. It outlines the awarded project, required project milestones that Renee just went through, and the approved project budget. It does also call out any ineligible use of funds that you may have applied for. You have the opportunity to review, determine which elements of the project we awarded, and discuss it with staff. Any changes to the Exhibit C will need to be made through written request. This doesn't need to be on a formal letterhead. Email is completely sufficient.
And just a note on this, while you were awarded based on the project that you submitted in the application, we do understand that sometimes things change either because they're a wanted change or they're a necessary change. You know, where we get concerned is 2 items. It's eligibility of expenses and eligibility of the project and the substantive change. So if you're changing a major component of the purpose of your project, just give us a call to talk that through so that we can make sure that it still meets all the requirements under the program guidelines and the grant agreement. And if you're going to change your expenses, those may not technically require a written request, but we are going to ask that you call us to let us know if those expenses are different than what's on your Exhibit C, because we want to make sure that they're eligible for reimbursement under the program. We want to make sure everyone maximizes their award amounts. So if there's anyone on here who's gotten a grant from us before, which I think we have one, you know, we've always tried to be very flexible about maximizing folks' awards. We don't want to leave any money on the table here. So as much as you were awarded, we want to be able to give you a check for.
As a note, Exhibit C does not need to be returned to us.
Yes.
Do you have another note on that, Renee?
I honestly can't recall if we mentioned to everyone that these are deadlines, milestones, not like a timeline for everyone to be held to. So if you finish earlier, we are more than happy to take your project completion report, even if it means you're done 3 months from now. The grant agreement is the same, and the grant agreement will have to be executed before we can give you a reimbursement. But you know, by all means, move forward with your projects because we're really excited to see how they all go.
Yeah, our goal is to get money into your hands so that you can reinvest in your business as quickly as possible. So these are deadlines, but they are by no means, you know, you do not need to wait that long.
Yes.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the documents that are needed to execute your grant agreement. So I have 3 documents shown on the screen. We will start with Exhibit G. This is the media release form. This will need to be signed, witnessed by a third party, and then returned to Capitalize Albany along with the grant agreement. Exhibit G explicitly allows Capitalized Albany Corporation and the City of Albany as one of our funding partners to use any photos or videos taken of the project for any reasons. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. Generally, it's just for publicity. We want to give you publicity, and we also like showing off the good work that happens through our grant programs so that we can get more funding for more grant programs. Exhibit H, the non-collusive proposal certificate, that's in the middle on the screen. This one will need to be signed, notarized, and returned to Capitalized Albany. In Exhibit H, you're going to certify that the estimates submitted as part of your application included prices that were arrived at independently and without any collusion, that all vendors and contractors had estimates that provided estimates had equal access to information, and the process was free of all improper bidding practices.
And the one thing I'll jump in with here is we've already gotten a few questions from folks about if you're buying equipment, do you still need to fill out that non-collusive? The answer is yes. We know that an equipment purchase is different from if you put out a construction project for bid or something like that. But the requirements are the same. And because it's just signed by the grantee and you don't have to get a signature from the vendor, we tried to streamline that a little bit.
Thanks, Renee. Finally, the certificate of liability insurance. This must name Capitalized Albany Corporation as a certificate holder. That's the box on the bottom left on the liability certificate. And it must name Capitalized Albany Corporation and the City of Albany as additional insured. The policy must include commercial general liability insurance and automobile liability insurance, each with a liability of no less than $1 million per occurrence and $2 million per aggregate. That is listed in the grant agreement, and we can always send that over if you have questions on how much. This needs to be returned along with that grant agreement. So all of these 3 exhibits, along with that signed and notarized grant agreement, will need to be returned to Capitalized Albany no later than September 8th. Once you've done that, you're going to go ahead and start your project. That's going to happen no later than December 31st, 2023. And then you'll complete your project no later than December 31st, 2024. Once you've completed your project, that's when you're going to go ahead and submit a reimbursement request. So all of the reimbursement.
Emma, can I?
Yes.
Let's take one beat. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Awesome. Josh, hit us.
Josh.
For the items that we need to submit to you, do you want to receive them all as attachments on the same email, or is it okay if we got you a couple of them at once and then maybe the insurance, like we're gonna have to wait a couple of weeks to get that in?
Yep, great question. Batch what you can, but send them as you have them. I'd say everything's going to go to development at capitalizedalbany.com. And just as much as you can put in your kind of subject line, like the name of your organization and grant agreement material or whatever it is. But we are here to work with you. So we're not going to make you jump through hoops. You do not need to wait to have them all at the same time. We'll keep track of what we have and what's still outstanding. Great question.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the executing the grant agreement process or the timeline? Yeah, go ahead.
Project completion actually constitutes. What is that? Is that the date of the first commercial sales, or is it?
I actually missed the beginning of that question, Jesse. If you could say that again.
Yes. What is project completion, right? So the criteria for reimbursability,
Yep.
is that the date of the first commercial sale, or is that a date that we declare? And the only reason I ask is that it may be that our project is completed prior to the date that we launch because of the exigencies of the Lark Street development.
Yep, so that is a great question. So we have in general kind of a couple different kinds of projects. If you are an existing business, and let's say your project was to get a new piece of equipment and install it, project completion is once that equipment is installed and in operation. If you are doing a construction project and you're an existing business, project completion is going to be once that construction project is completed. If you're a new business, one of the contingencies for reimbursement is that the business does have to be open and operating. That said, we don't need a grand opening. If you're doing a soft opening, if you're doing like, a couple of days a week, we can work with you. So definitely reach out as those timelines start to shift and solidify.
Word, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anything else? Yeah.
I did receive, oh, I'm sorry, was someone jumping in with a question?
Yeah,
I just
Yeah.
wanted to confirm, so as long as we have signed the grant agreement and all of this paperwork and turned it into you, we can then move forward and possibly purchase equipment before the end of the year?
Oh, highly encouraged.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to absolutely double
Yeah.
check, didn't want to
Yes.
mess you guys up.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. That would be great for everyone. I received a question in the chat about certificates of insurance for an equipment purchase for a micro grant. And honestly, I don't know that we discussed having a different insurance requirement for micro grant projects. So let us look into that and we'll get back to everyone with an answer to that question because it's a really good one.
Yep. This is, one of the first times we've really been able to divide our grant programs into kind of a micro grant and major project grant to allow the most flexibility. So as written, we have one standard set of insurance requirements. We may be able to kind of work with that. So we'll look into that.
Also know that historically we have not funded equipment through our traditional small business grant programs. So that's part of the reason that's an outstanding question.
Yeah. All right, anything else before we move into the reimbursement process? Okay, awesome. And thanks for stopping for questions, Renee. That was great. And, feel free to ask as we go. This is great. Renee and I are in the weeds with this all day long. So we're trying to get out of our own heads and like what's second nature for us is not actually what's second nature for business owners. We know that. So please ask as we go along. Clarifying questions are super helpful. All right. So once your project is completed and your business is open and operating, you can then go through that reimbursement process. So as part of the reimbursement process, you're going to submit Exhibit D, which is the project completion form. We'll talk about that in a minute. Exhibit E, a reimbursement request form. We'll talk about that right after this slide. And then all of the supplemental materials. Just a note is that no grant funds will be dispersed until these documents have been submitted to the satisfaction of Capitalize Albany staff. So you might submit one thing and we might come back and say, ooh, actually we need a signature here. Oh, we need a little bit more information on this. So the project completion form, Exhibit Ds, the submissions for these must include color photographs of your completed project, certificate of occupancy, if applicable, and an IRS W-9. That W-9 is at the back of the project completion form attachment you receive. We use these project completion reports to really track the success and efficacy of our grant programs, and this allows us to solicit more funding from our different funding partners. So thoughtful and thorough answers are really helpful to us. They let us know what we're doing well, they let us know really what the impact is on businesses, and we get to then share that with our partners like at the city to solicit more funding to do more programs like this. In the kind of examples on the screen, these are based on project completion reports we've received before. Numbers are really helpful. They're really specific ways to point and say, this investment leveraged something. This investment did real tangible things for this business. And again, those are all great. Those are things our funding partners like to see. All right, so also to note, the project completion forms do differ a little bit between micro grantees and major project grantees. They're slightly shorter for the micro grantees, again, just to offer that kind of streamlined, simpler program. As part of the Exhibit D, you'll also fill out a final project budget. So the final project budget, one of the things I really want to stress here is this is where you're going to show us the extent of the whole project. The micro grantees, they are eligible for 100% match up to their award. Major project grantees can be reimbursed at up to 90% of the total cost, up to the cost of the award of the total project cost. So this is where major project grantees must show a 10% match. That said, if you have more than a 10% match, please demonstrate the total cost of the project to the best of your abilities. Leverage is another number we get to use to our funding partners, and we can't stress this enough. We want to be able to do more programs like this. So even if we're providing funding for a discrete portion of a discrete phase of the project, a discrete portion of the project, if it gets batched up with a larger project, please include a line item that just says, phase 2, and the items there. The source of funds, capitalized Albany grant, is where you'll show the total that you're requesting. For reimbursement, owner equity is where you'll put in, the cash that you were providing for the project. Bank and others, if you've received any other funding, through other grants, other kind of funding opportunities.
And one quick note on that is that we don't have any minimum requirements for equity investment. There are grant programs out there that require you have at least like 10% cash that you're injecting into the project. We don't have anything like that. So if you financed the entire 10% of your required match, that's totally fine with us. Sorry, the last note on that is that I don't think we explicitly said it, although it's in the program guidelines, is you do not have to show us your invoices or proofs of payment for any of the matching component unless it's an expense that you're also requesting the reimbursement for. So if you have, a $30,000 line item and you're looking to just max out your grant reimbursement request for the 25,000 of that, then yes, we would need to see the invoice and proof of payment. But if it's a discrete line item for your match, don't worry about it. Just make sure you put it on that chart.
So the Exhibit E, the reimbursement request form, this is where you're going to show all of the invoices and receipts for which reimbursement is being requested. Like Renee said, you do not need to include items here that are being used as part of your match. So the Exhibit E submission, it must include the receipts and invoices that you're submitting for reimbursement, as well as proof of payment for each of those items, and documentation of any licenses, permits, or city approvals that were required for the project as applicable. Eligible invoices and receipts should clearly indicate the nature of the expense. So this means showing an invoice date, showing the scope of work or the items purchased, showing the vendor name and the total cost. A few examples of different invoices are on the right of the screen here. Proof of payment is required to back up these invoices and receipts. So these can be canceled checks, certified checks, credit card statements, bank statements showing the withdrawal. If you paid for something online and it shows a credit card payment with the last 4 digits and the stamp of the credit card payment, that is sufficient for proof of payment. For our compliance purposes, please do not pay for any items in cash that you're requesting reimbursement for. It's really hard to establish proof of payment for those items, and we report to our funding partners and have to maintain certain program controls. If you run into any issues with that, discuss. All right, so now Renee is going to run through some of the other requirements as part of the grant agreement, and that you as grantees will be responsible for.
So like we said earlier, the project signage, we anticipate those being window decals. We will provide those to you as soon as we have them. They should be on order for everyone. The next item is that there's a requirement in the program guidelines and your grant agreement for compliance with building codes and zoning. So where applicable, you've got to be in compliance with them and the Historic Resource Commission or anyone else who might have some approval authority over the performance of your project. It is your responsibility to reach out to them to see if you need any of those permits. However, if for some reason you have a concern about getting in touch with them, give us a call and we'll try to talk you through it, see if we might be able to answer any questions for you. Photography and media, as we discussed earlier, and just to reiterate what Emma said, we really are using that to promote the success of the programs and to highlight our small businesses and not-for-profits that we provide funding support to. Public announcements, media, and promotional materials is part and parcel of that. please recognize Capitalize Albany and the city of Albany if you're going to do anything promotional. Like if you're going to have a public announcement, if you want to have a ribbon cutting or issue a press release, you know, please mention us. Also, if you need help with it, give us a call. We, you know, we've been at how many ribbon cuttings in the last couple of weeks, I think. So we're definitely happy to help. And let's see, the insurance requirements, which we went over, record keeping. There is a requirement in the grant agreement that you maintain records through December 31st, 2029. For those of you who've had grants through us before, that sounds like a very far out date. That date was selected based on advice of counsel and reviewing the requirements for the funding source that we had for this program. So we do ask that you hang on to them. It helps us maintain compliance and be in good standing with like state and federal authorities, which is what allows us to continue to provide grants. And then the notice of investigation or defaults. So this sounds like a scary requirement. It's just something that we want to call out because if you are being subject to some kind of investigation or audit, the grant agreement requires you to notify us within 5 days. This is not something that you are opening yourself up to by participating in the program. It's just if you are being audited or something like that, please let us know so that we can be working with you throughout the process. And we've never had this happen before, by the way. Just because there is a timeline notice requirement in it, we wanted to mention it. You heard us say it 1,000 times throughout this webinar. If you have questions or something changes, call us, email us, however you need to get in touch with us. We are definitely here to help and answer your questions. So with that, additional questions, please put them in the chat box or feel free to just jump in. We tried to keep it short. We may have run through things too quickly, but we didn't want to eat up, you know, an extensive amount of anyone's time. We just wanted to make sure that we had this touch point and making sure that we went through everything.
I do have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
First, I must extend my gratitude, my sincere thank you to Capitalize Albany for awarding us this grant. It's truly, it will be such a blessing to our business, bring forth so much improvement, and words cannot express how much we are grateful, definitely grateful. And my question is, if you have finished your project, can you submit your application or your documents? Say, if I finish today, can I submit it tomorrow and get reimbursed?
As long as you've got the components of the grant agreement executed, you can send those to us. You can send it to us with the reimbursement documents if that's where you are on the process. And we'll just start diving into everything and reviewing it. So
Okay.
Absolutely.
And just to make sure, the period of time for reimbursement, what's the period of time?
So
Go ahead.
go ahead, Emma.
So in terms of, I think you mean about the turnaround time, that can depend on a couple different things. As Renee mentioned earlier, it depends on the completion of all the documents that are submitted to us. So the more we have to come back to you and ask for things, you know, if you didn't include the color photographs, if you didn't include permits for the project, and we have to come back and check, that's going to add time. In general, once we've received a completed all completed reimbursement requests, that completed final report, it can be kind of 3 to 4 weeks. That can change, you know, depending on holidays, if someone in our finance department is out, but that's kind of generally the timeline we aim for.
Okay, thank you.
We did just receive a question in the chat about finance fees. If you finance through Community Loan Fund, it is something that we understand is a part of the project costs. I don't want to say definitively no, but I don't think so. However, if this is a situation that you're in and we're talking about maximizing your grant award, just call us and we'll take a look at the numbers and see where everything lands.
We also received a question, is there a list of businesses receiving the grant money so we can help promote each other as well as the city of Capitalized Albany? Love this question. We can get a list out to all of you. So in our kind of recap, we'll send over the recording, which is a little truncated because I started it late, and we'll send out a list as well.
Yeah, I think the only things we missed were the intro on that, so I'm not too worried about it. Also, a shout out to Jesse for giving us a shout out in his most recent news piece about New Scotland Spirits. Thank you very much.
All right, any other questions? Okay, so again, I want to reiterate, we are thrilled to be here. If you couldn't tell from the smiles that kept popping up, it's like the most excited I've ever been to do a webinar. This has been, it's been such a learning experience for us. This is a new kind of program for us in some ways, and getting to see the enthusiasm each of you had for your businesses and the small bit and like the small business ecosystem in the city of Albany has been really invigorating. We are here to help in any way we can. So please give us a call, email us, reach out if there's anything we can do. I also want to say that it's, our enthusiasm is not just coming from us. We held a press conference earlier this week at City Hall. The mayor is really excited about this program. We had representatives at the state and federal level who came. The enthusiasm for the work that you guys are doing and the way that this money is able to support this is really, it's really widespread. So as much as we can help get the word out and shout out your businesses and the great work you've been doing and will continue to do, we will do everything we can. So let us know.
So I'm going to extend one offer to folks who jumped on late. If you came on late and you want us to review any parts of the grant agreement or reimbursement process, stick around. If not, you're all free to go. We really appreciate you joining us and taking the time out of your morning. Any feedback you have, shoot us an email or give us a call. And thank you all so much. And we'll just stick around for a couple minutes to see if